The GRAD Act is a sweeping piece of legislation that puts Louisiana higher education on a different track. It instills accountability and clarity in purpose for the different colleges and universities, as well as the community college system. It allows for growth in areas where the needs are to meet the workforce in Louisiana and the open jobs and the future projected jobs. It forces higher education into recognizing efficiencies and makes, I think, the entire system more accountable both to the student and the taxpayer. In turn, the GRAD Act gives the higher education system and the different schools, if they meet certain performance tests, the ability to raise tuition by up to 10% a year until it gets to the southern regional average, but no higher. This will help keep, that restriction will help keep tuition affordable in Louisiana, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible are able to go to college, and this piece of legislation strikes that balance. The legislation, as you all are well aware, I think does put Louisiana on a different course, a better course for the future. But quite candidly, it's not worth the paper it's written on if the detail is not adhered to and put in place from the very beginning that the staff has worked on so diligently since the end of session. And I'm very appreciative of that. And because of that work, I think we're in very good stead for seeing and being able to evaluate higher education and the improvements by campus, by program, by system, and as a whole for many, many years to come. And it's something that I think is long overdue and something that I think will benefit the people of this state, and particularly the students in this state, for decades to come. And you all deserve much credit for embracing the GRAD Act, for working particularly with Chairman Bob and all the other members who I had contact with during the session in particular, in helping push this through the legislature. It wasn't easy. Change never is easy. Accountability is never easy. But this is something that is critical for higher education, and I appreciate very much all of your participation and look forward to moving from here. I think what you just said, I think, is going to be so critically true, and that is this is going to raise as many questions as it answers. And so this is an evolving process, an evolving evaluation that will go on long beyond my tenure, or quite frankly, probably any of your tenure on the board or my tenure in the legislature. And it's something that I think we're going to be very proud of over the long term. Our systems are fragmented, and there has, until the GRAD Act, really hasn't been an accountability standard set for all institutions, be it four-year schools or two-year schools, be it postgraduate schools or whatever. And this sets in place a contract between the individual campuses and the Board of Regents and the systems as participants in outlining goals and objectives over a 6-year period that will instill a greater graduation rate, greater completion, greater efficiencies, and most importantly, productivity out of the higher education system.
I'm really concerned. We have to make dramatic, fundamental changes to our system out of necessity, because we just, there's no money, can't pay the lights, we're gonna have to shut some of these places down, right? So my concern is, because the model is in existence, we have a 2-year system, we have 4-year systems, we're going to take the kids that aren't ready for the 4-year system, we're going to put them in the 2-year systems, and they're going to coach them up and get them into the 4-year systems. And what you said shocked me, because, I mean, we're doing that, but we don't have any data. We're making these fundamental changes and we don't have any data. If you look at the 2 years, you're graduating 3% of the people that go there. You say, well, that doesn't matter, because that's not a relevant statistic. So, okay, it's not a relevant statistic, so what is a relevant statistic? Yeah. We don't know what the relevant, we want to study that. There are some groups out there studying it, but as a group, we've made a decision that we're going to shrink these 4-year schools, and we're going to push them into these 2-year schools, and we're going to get them educated, and we're going to push them on. We don't have any idea whether that's remotely going to be successful. First of all, because you've got multiple missions, as as been stated. I'm not picking on the two-year schools, mind you. I'm just saying that we're making these major decisions right now. We have an opportunity to rethink the way that we're putting all this together, and so we have to have data. So, like you said, the more we dig, the more questions. The only comment I want to leave with my colleagues today is that we've got, for example, a Dr. Noel who's done a brilliant amount of work, and I think he's going to win a Nobel Prize at some point for this work. I really do. And he's able to determine the value that an institution brings to what they're doing. And if you could take what he's doing, and we could take that, if he could design a model, or if people in his school or his colleagues can design a model and tell us, what value are you getting for your $17 million you're putting in these two-year schools? What are you getting? Are you getting anything out of that? Or are you just, sending kids in a revolving door, all these teachers, all these schools, all these buildings? I think that's the first thing that we have to do, is we have to get the proper data and ask the proper questions. Just one simple suggestion, on how we go about this process. And then let's not just continue to do things we've always done and try to fit square peg in a round hole. So that's it.
I've always had the view that increased tuition would help graduation rates, because why would you want to stay in school year after year if you were paying higher tuition? I mean, it seems to me that, both you and your parents would prefer that you graduate sooner if you're paying, more money per semester. Are there any studies on that point?
A couple of things in response to both you and Robert and Joe. Having been a resident of Mississippi and Kentucky both, I went through some of those early wars to get tuition increases in both states, and I'm glad to see they've continued to progress. On tuition issues, Mary Ellen, one of the things that will be looked at, needs to be looked at, is the current policy of, if you take 12 hours, take 20 hours, you're going to pay tuition the same as if you took 12. So I think we need to relook at this notion of charging per hour in terms of incentivizing students to move through the system as fast as they can. You've got to really, the old theory is that one of the differences between business and education is business has the profit motive to kind of drive analysis. What you've got now is the equivalent of a private profit motive, and that's educational attainment. Everything has to be looked at in terms of its ability to improve educational attainment. Even what you just talked about with Gene Burns and Dr. Knoll's analysis. Heretofore, all this stuff kind of exists out here with nothing appearing to connect the threads. I would submit to you that the thing that connects the threads and should connect the threads from here on out, what is the impact on educational attainment? And you will find, again, it will lead you in the direction of looking at all these kinds of things and developing the data. Now, you don't have good data. You're not alone. We didn't have very good data in Kentucky when we started. But every year you do this, Robert, you get better data. I had a kid, in fact, in my own household that joined a fraternity his first semester in college, had a good first semester from a fun sense. But, somebody, in fact, yeah, from his mother and I used to say that we didn't think we'd cleared the city line in Urbana before he was at his first party after dropping him off. But he went on, he became very successful, got a PhD finally. But, too many kids that happens to. Again, an example, Murray State University in Kentucky was one of our leaders in terms of graduation rates. The then president, King Alexander, who's now out at Cal State Long Beach, he would personally call students. They kept track of, were you attending? Were you falling behind? I mean, that's a rare university president that would do something like that. But your point, and Mary Ellen's point about personal attention, is really important, because you got to do that. Otherwise, they are going to slip through the cracks. And it can be done. It's going to take money to do it, and that may be, Joe, where increased tuition revenues. You want to, if you're going to have increased revenues, you want to be sure that they are being put to use to do the things that are priority. And I keep saying it, I'll say it as long as I'm with you, if you aren't doing educational attainment, you aren't doing anything. If you aren't worrying about what your long-term goal is, where do you want this state to be over what period of time, and what is it going to take to get there, then you're missing the boat. And that's, to me, that's one of the next big tasks in front of you, is to do a long-term projection. Where do you think Louisiana needs to be in terms of its educational attainment? Once you decide that, you can begin worrying about what the mix of that educational attainment looks like. But first, you got to figure out where you're going to be, where you're going to go, where do you want to go, where should you go? And again, I just keep saying, this legislation gives you the wherewithal to do that. It's not going to happen over time, but it will. It will happen.
Much like accountability in K-12 education now 12 years ago was controversial and led to some difficult changes that we're dealing with now through the Recovery School District, et cetera. This piece of legislation has the ability to identify weaknesses as we go forward and help correct them in higher education so that we are productive. Right now we have the lowest graduation rate in the South. We have students who are finishing school with enormous amounts of debt and no diploma. We want to stop all that. We want to make sure that we're matching up individuals with the abilities that they have to complete a degree that will benefit them in higher pay in a job that's out there in a skilled area that we're training them for through higher education. And I think that's the greatest thing about the entire package.